up on Rockfin in a second. There's that bit. And that bit.
I like the image.
I had, before the whole like lockdown and everybody has to wear a mask thing, I had a buddy of mine draw this image up as like, this is what a family having a barbecue is going to look like in 10, 15 years time or whatever. And then all of a sudden everybody's got to wear a mask. You've got to wear a mask outdoors in a completely ridiculous situation like grilling. And it just became ironically incredibly foreshadowed, just that's yeah, it's just really weird how that worked out, but
prophetic.
Yeah, accidentally. I was just going for a joke. Okay, close that. Oh, come on. Just want to spam a couple group chats.
I'm putting it in all the Discords here.
Okay.
Come through with children.
I do like how you're taking it biblical, Jones. That's old school. It is. It is. Back to the Bible.
I was baptized, technically.
Right. Simulated drowning is always how you get closer to God. You about ready? Right on. Okay. Let's do the thing. There we are. Hey, folks. Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Poikinen. I'm coming to you from the Santa Cruz Mountains for about another week. And good God almighty, am I ready to get the fuck up out of here. I am joined by my better than your co-host, Glory Jones. What's happening, Jones? We're also going to be joined for the first time in like a month, man, by Ali Alexander here in a little bit, who's stuck in Chicago traffic. But looking forward to that. Very, very stoked today to welcome to the show Tessa Leanit, aka Tessa Fights Robots, aka Tessa Makes Love, aka I don't know, but man, I have been incredibly impressed by and incredibly like moved by your writing over the last about year and a half since I've been aware of it, and I'm incredibly happy to have you on to the show. How's it going, Tessa? It's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You have a pretty interesting story in that a lot of the stuff that you write about and you talk about are concepts that I think some of the more, I don't know, attentive and sort of not necessarily conspiratorial, but like truth seeking and kind of.
Hey! I owned my conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I do. They're. I mean, it's conspiracy fact at this point.
Well, unfortunately.
But you were born in Moscow, right? Or around Moscow?
Yep. I was born in Moscow, and I think that my approach to life and philosophy and writing, it has been earned through some fairly painful experiences, but it makes you calm in the end and observant. And also observing different cultures, living in different cultures, seeing how different slogans that are seemingly opposite of one another, but they kind of impact people in the same way. That is at least my conclusion as of this second.
I want to talk about that because we get sort of, I don't know, boxed in the West in general, because 100% of the stimuli that we're getting is almost always, you know, Western centric and specifically tailored to this sort of American exceptionalism kind of approach, and that's not at all where you're coming from. And we're over here like with whatever experiences and background we have, and we've arrived at the conclusion that the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution is the complete commodification of nature and the total surveillance and enslavement of the human organism. Seems like you've come to a similar conclusion, and I'd love to know how you got there. And like,
I think that, I mean, like this conclusion is pretty easy to arrive at if you just read direct sources. I mean, they laid out there. They're not really hiding anything at this point. Although I think that the concept has been in the works directly for decades and indirectly probably for centuries, because, well, let's jump straight into the isms. You know, there's this argument that on the one hand, people say, okay, Great Reset is horrible because it's communist. Then on the other hand, there are people who say it's bad because capitalism is horrible and it's just capitalism. And I think it's kind of both or neither, really, because it is, to my senses, it is a continuation of the centuries-old paradigm where we were separated from nature artificially. Well, first by violence and then kind of by habit and trauma. And it just so happens that right now they have all this fancy technology that is really destructive. But the underlying, vibe, the underlying emotion, the underlying pain and confusion and aggressive tactics of separating people from nature, they're kind of really old. They go back, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. And the way I view the Great Reset is yet another religious reform, as destructive as other religious reforms have been, but on steroids, because now they have really advanced tech. So this is a very high level overview. And if there's anything in particular you want me to dive in, go ahead and I will with pleasure, or with pain, but talking about it is important.
So for years now on the show, I've been saying that like all of our isms have failed us, because I believe they have. Trying to figure out where that echo is coming from. It might be my fault. I don't know. Anyway, when thinking about that, when thinking about what isms do to us and how they operate. Wow, dude, I'm getting a gnarly echo.
Yeah.
Mute up, maybe.
Really? I mean, I'm getting no echo. I can try to use headphones, but
yeah, that's pretty.
I usually am.
No. There we are.
Disappear?
Oh, that's excellent. Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay,
Echo
that
away.
makes
Perhaps
it.
it was me.
Okay.
So much for having a
anyway.
music studio set up. Anyway.
And I definitely want to get into get into the music here, but I mean, for years now, I've been talking about how our isms have failed us, but I've not really necessarily gone into why on like an interpersonal or spiritual level, just that centralized power structures always and only breed and reward corruption and elevate the most sociopathic out of all of us, is what a centralized power structure does. It's what they're designed to do. They're just designed to keep expanding and to find new ways to excise state authority over the individual. It doesn't matter what ism you put on the end of it. The whole point of being like a conservative Republican at one point was limited government, small government. George Bush gets in office in 2000 and triples the size of government. Dick Cheney says deficits don't matter. In 2004, deficits don't matter. The Republican Party heard that and they ran with it and have continued to expand and grow the size of government. It was a capitalist system, essentially, or in marketing, that operates like an ever increasing state absorbing industry as it goes. This is completely in opposite to, again, the marketing of the rugged individualist capitalist. Contrast that with the size of the communist state at the height of the USSR, and I would wager that if you counted military bases, the U.S. has more land mass under its control than the USSR did, operating essentially as the same multi-headed state. Go ahead.
No, I think, well, monopoly has a very interesting psychological impact on people. And I would argue, even theoretically or practically, that the concept of communism is really a super monopolistic capitalism in essence, with a different set of talking points, a different model theoretically of distribution, but it goes into the same thing where select few get a lot and then most get nothing. And if there's a monopoly, then certain psychological controls just go out of the window and people do whatever they want. But I would want to go even significantly deeper than that scholastic level, because, well, there's a story that I like to tell going into isms and symbols and similarity in approach. Like centuries ago, well, I'm from Moscow, and in Moscow centuries ago, before Christian reform, that was like 11 centuries ago, there used to be a pagan sacred place. Then when the local leader decided that it would be cool to convert people to something that was not pagan, and there was a choice. At that time, the leader, they were choosing between two different types of Christianity, Judaism and Islam, and ultimately based on combination of factors that had to do with politics and aesthetics, they went with Orthodox, with Eastern Christianity. So they destroyed the pagan spot, the pagan sacred place, and they built a Christian church there. Then, centuries later, when the Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917, naturally they declared that religion is horrible, and so they destroyed the church, and they built a swimming pool. And then when the Soviet Union fell apart, and then religion was in vogue again in a very kind of, well, a part of it was sincere, part of it was state ideology. And then they destroyed the swimming pool and they built another Christian church, and kind of very expensive looking, very official and a little gaudy. So it seems like as time went by, but the approach did not really change. They just replaced one set of talking points with another. But the principle of, I know best how you should approach your spirituality, your faith system, your way of essentially perceiving the world, that entitlement to other people's spiritual identity, that didn't really change. And it seems like that is something that people have been dealing with for many, many, many centuries. And another thing, well, I personally believe that ideology is really an emotion in disguise, because from what I observed in just people and relationships, people who are spiritually at peace and relatively emotionally secure, like obviously perfection is not possible because, life is complex and we are human and it's a difficult journey, but more or less spiritually secure and at peace. Generally speaking, in that state of mind or feeling, people do not have the need to impose on other people's spiritual identity. And it's relatively easy to even discuss things over disagreements because you just accept the fact that you don't own other people. And maybe their ideas are crazy. But even if you think their ideas are absolutely batshit, nonetheless, they're entitled to that. I mean, you're entitled to protecting yourself. But beyond that, it just doesn't even occur to you to go ahead and tell them how to believe in things. However, if that condition is not met, if a person is unhealed, and objectively, legitimately unhealed, it is not a fault, it is, a state, then there's this need to build a verbal tower around yourself that ends up being an ideology of some kind, where the truths are linear and logical, and they live in this scholastic realm, where it's on some kind of almost physiological level, it becomes difficult for people to bear the disagreements or the thoughts expressed that they think are dangerous. And that is more of an emotional condition, a spiritual condition, than scholastic or ideological per se. And for instance, what I observed when I was a child, and there was a drastic difference between different generations in the Soviet Union. For example, the generation of my grandparents, they were hardcore believers in the ideals of communism. And again, communism as in whatever the textbooks said, right? And they were a very harsh generation. They were born shortly after the revolution. So that's the only world they knew. That's what they were taught at school as kids, militantly. Of course, the schools at the time taught that if parents say anything different, then parents are outdated and don't listen to the parents. It's kind of similar to the atmosphere today, right? So, and they were hardcore believers. They were, I think I'm frozen.
No, you're good.
Okay, so for some reason it's frozen me. So I will be staring at your beautiful images. If you can see me, then it's good. So they really, oh, you're moving. That's wonderful. So they were really harsh, and they were very kind and warm and loving. They would like give you their last meal if that generosity. A lot of them came from the village too. So there was this rural generosity. And even if they moved to cities to work at a factory or whatever, nonetheless, there was this rural warmth. However, they were extremely rigid in terms of expressions of ideas. And they stayed this way. And then by the time when they were old and the Soviet Union fell apart, and so essentially the official ideology changed 180, where it was like communists were horrible people, Bolsheviks were villains and evil people who were murderers. And so essentially everything that they held sacred. And they fought in the war. They defeated Hitler. They went to great sacrifices. So humanly, they were really strong people and really wonderful. But everything they believed in, their sacred feeling centered around talking points, it was just tossed and laughed at. And I'm thinking, how tragic is it? Like, they were essentially betrayed by the system that trained them to believe in a particular way. And that was just really painful to see. And so the lucky ones, it's, they have a family, they have grandchildren who love them regardless of all that. I mean, the grandchildren might disagree with communist ideas. They might think it's ridiculous, but nonetheless, they love them. And that's where the consolation comes from and kind of the healing feeling. But then the generation of my parents, they were kind of the in-between, and they were victimized by that harshness. So they were not really strong believers as much, but because their parents chose the ideals of the state, sometimes over their own children's souls, that created a lot of pain and confusion and kind of not necessarily even explained. And then my generation, people a little bit older than me left that whole Soviet thing out of the room and decided, okay, that was all bullshit, that was all nonsense, that was all evil, it was like big lie from the state. So we are going to completely just disregard it and throw it out and just leave it behind as a lie. And so then I spent years figuring out why, like where my insecurities come from, because I was taught to please this indefinite, like vaguely defined community values that were not really community values. They were kind of this officially defined set of behaviors you're supposed to practice in order to allegedly not offend other people or to like support them. So if you're happy, you're very suspicious, because also Russian culture is very, like it's centuries of abuse essentially, like for like state abuse before the Bolshevik Revolution, then after the Bolshevik Revolution. So there's this melancholy and sadness And my theory is that it comes from the time when the Christian reform was imposed, and then something was taken away. Everybody forgot. Many centuries have passed. Nobody remembers what happened, but that feeling that something was taken away and that resentment and sadness, it kind of lingers. I mean, that's my theory about it anyway. And as a result, I came to the States essentially to run away from gloom. It wasn't anything political. It wasn't anything. I mean, I just couldn't stand this total misery of every adult. And they had hard lives. So I mean, like, there's nothing to criticize. I sympathize with that, but it was just really, really sad. And it took me literally years to sort through this, like, where it was coming from and why I felt so resentful of those people. And then I started watching movies, Soviet movies from the 50s and the 60s. And I realized, oh my God, they were subjected to such horrible propaganda, just such lies. And one thing is to understand it in theory. Another thing is to actually see how it was done. And ironically, a lot of those lies are almost twins of what we are being taught today, as far as that, march of science, where it was considered cool when, say, college-educated city folk would come to the village and tell the peasants how to farm. And tell in no uncertain terms, like, this is how you farm. If you don't listen to us, if you don't accept pesticides, if you have any objection to those pesticides or whatever it was, fertilizers at that time, then you are backward and you should be re-educated. And so all that has already failed, like decades ago in the Soviet Union. So to me, it's astonishing to observe it again, like a deja vu. So if you have any thoughts or questions, I've been talking and talking and talking. So
yeah, no, I mean, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show today, just because I've talked to a number of people that I know from the USSR, when it was USSR, that expatriated, and I've heard like almost an identical story from all of them, in that nobody can believe what they're seeing happen in the US and in the West, because it is almost a complete mirror image of what was happening to the Russian people, to people in that whole East Bloc throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And the sort of, I don't know, mandating allegiance, not necessarily even to the state, but to the ideal of the state, something so intangible and so like mutable. It is so just mind-boggling to me how it can be affected on a mass population. It's almost like a hypnosis has to take place.
I think it's something that happened throughout history as well. Like, as the same thing was happening in the USSR, a very similar thing was happening in the US via like the CIA's influence in Hollywood and Operation Mockingbird, and just any sort of antagonizing of state. Because I kind of come at it from a perspective of, being in the Caribbean diaspora, seeing how the indoctrination of like these two massive blocks affected kind of the global South. So it's fascinating to me to see how you have these two mirrors of indoctrination and how that kind of continued throughout history, because like you brought up kind of how the pagan worshiping sites were taken down in favor of Christian churches. And then it would continue as it would be those Christian colonizers, which would then write history and go on to be teaching the future generations of people and lead to kind of this continued cycle of indoctrination. So, yeah, it's fascinating.
Oh, for sure. And well, the strange thing is, again, that human psychology, it operates almost identically no matter what the talking point. And we all notice that in just talking to people. Sometimes, you talk to people, you think completely identically to them based on certain things you agree on. And then something comes out of your mouth that breaks their ghosts, that breaks their ideological, like very important ideological thing. All of a sudden, like their eye expression changes. They're something like, whoa, 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 whoa. But no, don't say that. And it is funny because then it doesn't matter what talking points, like whether it's the left, the right, the whatever, it's almost, and then you have to, okay, so this is the state the person is in. You have to dance around and kind of like do that dance that we all know. So absolutely.
Getting into the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, there really aren't a lot of people that are writing factually or honestly about this, and it's a shame because, again, I mean, in my opinion, it's the culmination of at least a century of plotting by the predator class in order to get all of it, everything that's left, all at fucking once. And it interests me in general to hear how people stumbled on it or approached it and then saw what was going on with it and went, oh fuck, I need to write about it. So if you could kind of walk us through that would be great. We'll get I'm sure some wonderful tangents off of that as well.
Well, tangents are where we're at, right? So it started with the fact that, well, I'm a musician, and it so happened that big tech completely destroyed the music industry, and musicians were one of the first lab rats in that sense, where all of a sudden, and it's funny because this is where I get into, well, maybe saying certain things are not that popular, but the thing is that big tech was plotting for about 2 decades to create this concept that information should be free because, and I mean, there's this whole thing around it, right? But in reality, they're very much protective of their own intellectual property. All they wanted to be free is other people's intellectual property, such as musicians and photographers and such. And I ended up being obviously on the receiving end of that stick because tech companies essentially stole all the income from the musicians. And there was a lot of propagandistic, like Googles of the world spent a lot of money and a lot of lobbying to weaponize people maybe who don't have a lot of money and who would rather pirate music against actual musicians, which were really on the same side. But big tech, people with actual money, created this artificial division. And so I was in activism for musicians, right? So by necessity, I started investigating big tech and what they wanted to do. And then, of course, it's a kind of worms. And all the transhumanism came out. And there was even a religion of AI with Godhead, AI Godhead. It was officially registered as a religion. So by virtue of investigating big tech, when 2020 happened, I was like, wait, what health response? It's literally everything that they were trying to do for years. And all of a sudden they're getting that and 10 times more and everybody's applauding. Wait a second. Like, wait, like what health response? Like, Google was trying to push for Google Classroom forever and ever and ever. And they couldn't quite go very far with that. Mm-hmm. Then Google and other similar companies, of course, they were trying to go after medical data desperately. And they didn't go very far with that. And then 2020 happens, we have a health emergency, and now they have everything. So then that just didn't seem very plausible to me. And then, of course, when the World Economic Forum came with their wonderful branding about the Great Reset, and it was all out in the open, then I just felt compelled to write about it philosophically, because like one of the things that I think is important is not feeling fear about it. And this is something I think about a lot because, okay, so it is a religious reform. Like any religious reform, it comes with a huge economic incentive for the select few. And it is essentially neo-feudalism with a lot of technology and a lot of insane ideas. So,
Yeah.
I have my reservations where they really believe in immortality. I think it might be just a really insane selling proposition. And it's possible that, 2 or 3 billionaires really dream of living forever. But I think they're really trying to push for immortality for man's immortality, literally, where it's about digital twins, which really is a bundle of data. Mm-hmm. Like if we really strip it of all fancy words, it is just really data bundles with an AI handler attached to them. And they're trying to sell it to the people. Oh, you're going to live forever by giving us all your data and allowing our AI to manipulate it. But yeah, we're going to call it living forever. I mean, this is absolute con. But aside from that, I mean, like many reforms, it's a con. But because they repeat it so many times, and there's so many journalists who are amplifying this message, and it's hard for any brain to accept that like everybody's wrong, or the majority is wrong, or the state is completely evil. I mean, like it's very hard. And actually, a tangent, a much promised tangent. At some point, well, I did Tibetan studies in my past life. Well, not fancy past life, actual, early in my life.
On board.
And at some point, I was at a conference in Beijing on Tibetan studies. And naturally, it wasn't Beijing, so it was all about friendship of people and all those things. And I was aware that there was an invasion there. I mean, there were some horrible things done. And as I was sitting there, and they're talking about friendship of people, building the roads, progress, all those talking points. And it's very soothing. Like, I wanted to believe in that because it's much more pleasant to believe in that version of reality, like completely clean, wonderful. And yeah, maybe there was some, misunderstandings or like little conflict here and there, but it was all like out of the goodness of their heart. But I was like, wait, no. This is, I know better. And then I had to go through several times of reminding myself, like kind of slapping myself out of that slumber in the course of whatever it was, half an hour, 40-minute presentation. And that was the first time, and that was before I read anything about propaganda, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was just my own physical experience of how it works. So I think it is not really surprising that when people who've never dealt with such massive abuse and who associate themselves with being relatively like respectable job, good education, smart, all that, it is extremely hard for the brain to make the switch. Oh, maybe I'm an abuse victim and the government is trying to pull off like a really horrible reform, and that is global. I mean, that's a stretch, right? Like going from one place to another. So it'll probably take some experience and some time for people to really catch up with that. But going back to not being afraid. So the reform is horrible and it is insane, clinically insane, because if they want to give us a delusion or illusion of the world where we can birth machines and assemble people, we can genetically modify any life form and essentially approach living beings like they're machines, literally. Like there's no, and of course, there are government documents and contracts that confirm the crazy conspiracy theory that convergence of biological life and machines is something they're actively considering, working on, and money is put into that. So it's not really a conspiracy theory, it's factual. And it's nonetheless crazy. So for a person to realize that, okay, so this is the world we're in, they are actually trying to merge us with machines. They want to own our genetics. They want to own our DNA. They want to approach us like we are somewhere in between.
A fucking Build-A-Bear workshop.
Oh my God, I forgot about Build-A-Bears.
Right. So it is scary. It is extremely scary. But I think it is important to go above that and realize that it's really a spiritual battle and not in some kind of new agey, fancy, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm not into that. It's genuinely a spiritual battle, and we can only object and resist the Great Reset with actual love. And because, it's important to provide good information. It's important to understand what's happening. But if we limit our resistance to just posting scary stories or telling scary stories, then we become an echo chamber of people who just pat each other on the back, feeling smart. And it's like, see what they're doing. And, you know, to a certain degree, it's necessary because we do need to understand what's happening. But I think that even if 50 million people post something about horrible transhumanism, it's not going to change their plan because they have a lot of money. Yeah. And my opinion and feeling as of this second is that if we have a chance, and I think we do have a chance, but it is significantly less glamorous than most other things because it boils down to what people have to do, like for millions of years, fix our relationships. You know, try to treat people with respect for their soul, respect your own soul, find what is unhealed inside you and try to heal it. You know, work with communities. And it is extremely, like, you know, there's no hashtag attached to that. It's unglamorous spiritual work. And then just pray for answers and look for the spirit inside you and everywhere. And that's the only thing we can do, I think.
I mean, I think that's one of the things, I think that's a very kind of tangible solution to have, because one of the things that the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution aims to do is to distance us from our own humanity, like distance us from that part of us that's spiritual and in touch of nature and in touch with nature and passionate and loving and all that. And that's honestly like where a lot of my opposition to that comes from. It comes from the fact that they're trying to commodify nature and distance ourselves from that and from our own like natural human tendencies and spirits. So I think, you know, the idea of fighting back with that is something that's very appealing, and it's a lot less, you know, reactionary too than just, you know, a bunch of, not saying that transhumanism is like amazing or anything, but like a bunch of transhumanist fear porn that a lot of people are spreading to, you know, really just force people back into boxes.
Yeah.
No, fear porn is never good. And I had to deal with that myself because when I just started researching that, well, luckily I started researching that years ago, which was not when it was straight in our faces. So it was kind of a conversation over the glass of wine where like, oh my God, can you believe what those guys are doing? I mean, hopefully sometime after my lifetime, I mean, like it's possible that they're going to try it, but no way it's going to happen anytime soon because it's just too crazy, right? So, but I went through that phase of getting freaked out by it before it felt really dangerous. And I think that for anybody who started looking into that relatively recently, it is overwhelming. So, I mean, I can understand the fear because if you think about it in terms of just logic, like linear logical points, the richest people of the world with all this power, with all the money, technology, control over media and politicians, they are trying to turn us into digital assets and mess with our bodies. I mean, that fear for our bodies, I mean, that is extremely understandable. Like nobody can be blamed for feeling this way because it's natural. But I think it just takes some working through that and some healing work. I mean, again, it's a fancy word that has been hijacked. So I don't even like this phrase, but it's, you know, something mysterious that people had to do for millions of years in their own internal lives and external lives. Yeah, I mean,
it gives you a ton of insight into the mindset of the predator class when you understand that what they fear the most is death and loss of legacy.
Yeah.
So you're seeing the manifestation of that fear in what they're trying to obtain. And in the Great Reset, it's total commodification of every living organism. The ability for man to commodify everything, including thought, and punish and manipulate and control everything, including thought. We have pre-crime in the United States now. There's a gentleman named Daniel Baker who's sitting without charges and without bail for a crime that he may commit at some point in the future. This shit's real. So if you know going in that what these people fear the most is loss of legacy and death, it becomes a little bit easier to combat, especially, Tessa, if you're correct, and we combat this with love and with spiritual healing, because it is of death is of no significance or consequence except for in the immediate material. And legacy is something that really only matters to the people that you love or that love you. And if you've done a decent job of being a human being, your memory is going to be carried on by the people that you love. So these aren't things to be afraid of. I think it's something that we can, challenge as both individuals and a decentralized collective of individuals. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that, death is a significant event. It is, in my belief, a transition to, going home. But at the same time, I think that any human being dealing with that is, we cannot take it lightly. It's a big deal. And it is a very important thing, being afraid of it. I'm sure somebody going into that has some very strong feelings, but we'll probably find out individually only, when we are in that place. But existentially, I think that, there's a lot of materialistic ideology attached to even the health response, because one has to have maybe completely terrified, because one has to maybe think that, okay, if you die, you die, that's it, that's all that you get, in order to be that terrified of whatever was happening in the past year. But it goes even beyond that. I think control is a big part of what drives the Great Reset, because a part of it is that, okay, so the richest people probably don't do their own research. They probably have highly paid consultants. And it looks like the trendy idea of the day is that, okay, the planet is small, it's finite. Finally, we are in a place where infinite expansion doesn't really work. So we kind of have to get our asset management system really together. And somebody came up with a brilliant idea of essentially counting every living form on Earth and every mineral on Earth and putting it into this whole Taylorist conveyor, systems management. And again, Frederick Taylor, at the time, there was not such much, there was no such grand technology, right? But when he came up with his scientific management. But, I'm sure the way he came up with it. He hired some people to do certain, and that was during the time of Ford, right? So he hired some people to do industrial tasks, and then he observed how they were doing that. And he made a calculation how to break down all those processes into tiny tasks that things can be more efficient. And then the workers really felt humbled. They really hated it because it reduced them to being robots, essentially. But then on the level of factory owners, the productivity really went through the roof. It was really profitable. And this is how it took off. And then, so that approach, that efficiency and control that drive transhumanism, it comes from ultimately disrespecting other people's souls. Because if your profits require other people to turn into little robots, to part with their creativity, because if you're a craftsman, maybe it takes you a week to make a table, you take your time, you approach it literally like you're writing a song, something creative, right? Maybe you're not that productive, but then you create a work of art and you feel good and there's no compromise you have to make. But if you are forced to just be making one leg of a table for the rest of your life on the clock, it's really you'll get sick. It's just not healthy. but the factory owner doesn't care because whatever. And then if you apply this approach to all biological life, then you're really a sick human being, frankly. And, another tangent. At some point, I was married to an abusive guy, like truly abusive. And that was awful. And I thought, oh, why did I have to deal with that? And then when 2020 happened, I was like, oh, that's why, because I'm familiar with the techniques.
I can relate with that.
Well, sisterhood, hugs.
Yes, yes, definitely.
And so I remember that he was genuinely, sincerely, massively distressed when he, for instance, couldn't find a television remote control. I mean, that was distress, like sincere. He couldn't handle a lack of control. So there was something was missing on the inside. So the suffering he was experiencing was not fake. It was real. It was batshit crazy, but it was real. So I think that the people who have that degree of anxiety over not having control, I mean, they themselves need help. Now, maybe they're not our first priority to help because, like, we need to protect ourselves first. But if you understand that we are dealing with not just greed and not just, all those horrible incentives, but people who are not okay, they're crazy, and they are in pain, and they're trying to fix their pain at our expense because that's the only thing that they can come up with. I think that concept of, so we are in a madhouse, yes, and unfortunately the crazy people are at the wheel, and that is unfortunately reality, but that makes you less scared in a way, because then it gives you context. You're not just dealing with the enemy, you're dealing with people who essentially need help. And first you protect yourself, but there's no other way than, again, coming up with healing for yourself, for your community, and practicing the only thing that they don't have. We can't compete them with money. We can't compete with them using their own tools from their toolbox, because we have no way. They have a lot more of that, and we just can't. It's just not going to work. But if we find that mystery and that feeling and that understanding, and we can even approach them, well, with love in the philosophical sense of it. It doesn't mean we have to give them what they're trying to get. No way. But if we just see that they're part of this huge puzzle, the big picture that we possibly cannot understand as one human being, because the human experience is such as we're a little limited in our vision, maybe more than a little. It's just not this is what human experience is. We cannot see the total big picture. But maybe they're playing a role. Like predators, they play a role of, first of all, making sure we don't fall asleep, because falling asleep is just not good for us. And maybe they show up because they indicate that, yes, we have a problem as a community. Things are a mess, and things need to be fixed. And we should get to work and fix things that we can fix around us. And maybe it'll generate some chemical reactions in the world, so that the more people put out love into the world. And I don't mean cheesy. I don't mean turning the other cheek. I don't mean just squeezing your teeth and accepting abuse. Love is not accepting abuse. Love is healing yourself from abuse and helping others to heal from abuse and spreading courage.
I love that. I think that I say this a lot of the time, and I've read some things you've written about this, the concept of trauma and how that's manifesting itself in the world and what we're dealing with these people. It's a lot of just, I would say, very unhappy people, and that's how they project it. So I really like your take on this, because I think for a lot of people that, try to comprehend this in a way that makes sense to them, it's hard to, but you just put a really good human aspect to these people. They are just human beings. I mean, granted, they're psychopaths. They have a lot of, undealt with issues, but if we can approach it more with kind of that realistic understanding of who they are, I think it's easier to deal with, in a sense, I would say. I really like your perspective.
I did. I enjoyed the caveat that doesn't mean we give them what they want, because far too often, especially here, we give broken people what they want so they'll shut up and go away. Or we give in to broken demands and broken desires for expediency.
Yeah.
Because it's unpleasant, because we just want to go on to whatever the next thing is, and we're not stopping to think, I'm rewarding a broken person with exactly what they want. So I am teaching this person that I am susceptible to their demands based on pressure or persistence, and that I can be got eventually if they just keep at me. I can be got. And that's what you're sending out. And I do think that, like, a very not necessarily correctly talked about component of healing is understanding that love doesn't mean giving broken people what they want. And I don't, like, I think that's something that everybody needs to remind themselves fairly often, just from what I encounter by leaving my house. Like, you don't, it is in the immediate painful to say no to a broken person because they will lash out at you. But if you keep giving broken people the things that they want, like we've done with every fucking pretend election that we've had, like we've done when nobody got up and said, wait a minute, Donald Trump just gave $5 trillion to the richest people on the planet and called it healthcare. Hang on. That doesn't make sense. What? Hey, you now need to know every single thing about me and what people have stuck into my body before I can go into your restaurant? Wait, hang on. You know, what?
Hang on a sec.
That hasn't fucking happened because we kept giving broken people what they wanted. And part of loving ourselves and part of resisting the Great Reset has got to be an understanding that giving into the warped desires of broken people is not going to get us anywhere sustainable.
Unfortunately. And I think this process is extremely not easy. It is probably one of the most difficult things one can do. I know, like, I struggle with it. It's not easy. And I think there's no formula for that. You know how American pop culture, and I'm saying it as an immigrant, American pop culture, even during the very peaceful times, it had this approach, like you open a glossy magazine and it tells you like 5 ways to date, right? I mean, like there's a formula for everything. Yeah. So it doesn't really work this way. And especially with things as complex as this, I think it's all in the moment. I mean, like sometimes if you're dealing with a friend, somebody who's close to you and who's broken, I mean, like you give them as much as you can give them while staying whole, and you dance this dance, and it's energy consuming. Like love is work. Love is not, I mean, like love can be many things, but in essence, it's work. And you just dance this dance. But then, of course, if a psychopath comes up to you who is not your friends and family, and they say, wait, let me put something into your body, then it's a different conversation. But there's no formula for anything. And I think this is one of the most difficult things for a modern person to get. Like it took me years of like some, well, interesting to say the least experiences to arrive at that state where I'm even capable of like thinking in those terms. Because normally if you're yourself traumatized, right, and then somebody's going to give you their crap, then you just flip. You're like, no, I have just no resources to deal with that, go away or whatever. And, or you like, you know, you freak out. And, did Steve go? So then it takes like work and you know, banging your head on the wall and thinking, how do I solve this? How do I solve this challenge? So it doesn't come easy. It's not like tomorrow you wake up and you're real, like tomorrow I'm going to do everything with love and I'm just not going to give them anything and I'm going to just love myself and do the, I mean, it's a very nice intention, but usually like, you know, 5 minutes later, somebody tells you something, you're like, oh, that didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. That's like you follow like 3 steps to happiness, and the next day you're like, it takes work. In our society, we definitely want a solution for everything, a very easy one. But that's, you know, you've said this, like this is work. All of this takes work. True mindfulness of it as well.
Yep. And the irony of it is that there's nothing, I mean, it is so incredibly unglamorous. We're all trained to, you know, do a little thing, post it online with a picture, the hashtag, and everybody likes it. And everybody says, oh, you're such a great person. And like, it feels good. And then you're motivated to do more of the same. But it's a trap. I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with posting a picture every now and then and like, you know, getting like, it's awesome. But you got to remember that this is not really how things happen.
It's a good feeling you have to pay for.
Right.
It costs you money. Feeling good like that costs you money. That's a dopamine hit. Dopamine you always have to pay for in some way, shape, or form. And that's why the Predator class is trying to funnel every good experience you have through an online one, because you're always going to have to pay for that. To get a serotonin hit, to get oxytocin, to get those good feelings. Those, you don't have to pay for those. You get those when you hug somebody. You get those when you kiss somebody. You get those when your bare feet hit the real ground, the actual earth. Those are all good feelings that don't cost you money. You need to remember that and like make that a part of your healing and make that a part of the love that you express, because real, actual good feelings aren't supposed to fucking cost you anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a part of the whole commodification of this process is to make it seem like all it takes is posting something on social media for likes, you know, posting a colored square on social media on your freaking IG story and getting likes on it.
I'm like, an activist now.
Commodifying that whole process of trying to, you know, make the world a better place and help people have sort of like some kind of revolution in their values or spirituality. Like it's like you said, that process isn't glamorous and it isn't easy and it isn't quick, but it still has to be done at the end of the day. Like you have to take those steps to try and do it, because like, even if it is like a little genuine action, when you plant that seed, you might never know what it'll grow into. But I mean, that's kind of like the beauty in activism. And that's one of the things that keeps you going is, you know, having sort of a faith and a spirituality that leads you to believe, okay, yes, this is a part of this long game. It's going to grow into something amazing. And, you know, it wasn't the easiest to do, but it'll get us somewhere in the end.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes, and that has nothing to do with the Great Reset or anything, it's just a general thing. But sometimes, you know, you walk on the street, maybe you're in a horrible mood, somebody smiles at you, and they never know that they changed your day, but it does happen. And then you never know what leads to what. And Steve, to what you said, as far as free things versus things that you have to pay for with money and how they try to funnel everything through their channels. Actually, I recently wrote a piece about the war natural immunity and ability. And thank you. And so this is, of course, not a new trick. Like corporate interests have been trying to divorce us from our natural joy and make us pay for things for quite a while.
Yeah.
Right now, what is interesting, you know, there's this business strategy called Blue Ocean strategy. And it has to do with not really wasting your time in the existing market, which is an ocean red with blood from all the competition, and creating a whole brand new ocean, blue ocean, a brand new market, and write your rules and own this market. And in theory, you know, it's a clever concept. You know, one can argue that it's good. But like everything, it's been abused and taken to the extreme. And the whole concept of body as a platform, or the internet of bodies, like as I was saying, that a healthy person with good immunity is an insult to biotech entrepreneur. It is. So it is in their best interest to make you believe that you need artificial immunity, then artificial like devices floating around your body, replacing your actual bodily functions, because the devices can do a better job than nature over millions of years, of course, right? But if you are not a human being, not a mysterious person with a soul who is deserving respect. But if you are a platform and a market to fight over or to make money from, then what do you think? Like, who do you think you are to have natural immunity? No, like, then you're mine. Your body's mine. So I mean, like, that is such a sick approach to life.
It really is.
And unfortunately, it's a trendy one.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, like, just not accepting the human body or human state experience as a natural one anymore is just, that's what I would say does scare me a lot. Like you said, that they see us as just platforms now, like blank canvases to essentially commodify. The internet of bodies is horrifying. That is horrifying to me.
To say the least.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Gloria, I saw the steam come out of your ears when she brought up the ocean. I don't know if you want to touch in on that or not, but I did. I saw it happen. I did.
There's a lot of things in particular that involve the ocean, and in the grander scheme of things, there is very much an effort to plunder and commercialize the oceans in a way that's branded as being pro-coastal communities, when in reality it's not. I'll leave it at that.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, like that whole love of the environment and the indigenous people, quote unquote, wink, wink.
Yeah, right.
It is so horrible.
Yeah, because it's so false. The way that they obfuscate and the way that they use language now, especially like the World Economic Forum and everybody with the Great Reset, just obviously the buzzwords like sustainability, but just even other ways where they try to come off as like compassionate and caring, and it's actually so sinister, and people just don't see that right away, which is understandable because of the way that it's worded.
No, the hijacking of language, I mean, that's my personal pet peeve. It's been done for a long time, and now they're doing it in a way that suits people of the 21st century, but it's so awful. And I think a part of the problem is that, especially in the Western society, by now the community is, especially in the cities, like people really are lacking the community in the true sense of it.
Yeah.
And we have a void. And also people feel, especially people who are relatively well off, like middle class, upper middle class, and people with good hearts. But there's this need to redeem for something. And when somebody gives them a slogan that says, oh, you're going to be a better person because sustainability and compassion and community values, they're like, hell yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Let me hang
want to
this
be a better
sign up.
person.
Right. They want to feel good and, like, I did something good.
And I mean, when they steal things like love and compassion and community and sustainability, which are all, I mean, they're all good words. They're all supposed to mean something really good. Unfortunately, they don't.
Nope.
Tessa, you're getting a lot of love in the chat here. And there's a handful of people who were very familiar with your work and like wondering why you hadn't been on already.
Thank you.
I get likes, yay!
Of course.
You know what? We're really, really, really fortunate, and I don't even know how it happened, but almost everybody's YouTube chat is just this cesspool of suck and like vulgarity and vileness and like everything that's horrible about the internet is all like damn near every YouTube chat on the planet. Ours is not like that. It's not. Like, it's fucking weird. It's an anomaly. It really is.
Yeah.
There are people who have like found each other in the Slow News Day chat, met in real life, exchanged bodily fluids, and are still together. Like, love has happened here. It has. And 9 times, like, if anyone comes into the chat who just wants to be a shitbird, like the entire chat like drops everything they're doing and they're like, okay, let's escort you out now.
Yeah,
we were trying to have a nice moment and learn together, and you're not here for that, so fuck you. And like it really is a magical fucking place. And So, but by demand now, we're going to have you back on for another conversation, or else the audience is going to come and get me. So I don't want that to happen.
No pressure.
No pressure, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, this is wonderful.
I do love bragging on our chat, though. It really is the best and best looking chat on the planet, for sure. I wanted to. There were a couple of things that I had follow-ups to, and I fucking forgot my notebook to jot shit down during the show. We're on like high fire alert in the mountains here right now.
So scary.
So I'm like half distracted by that. I've actually had to evacuate in the middle of a live stream before.
Oh, wow.
Last year we were doing the Assange vigil and my phone went off and it's like, oh, there's a fire 2 miles away. You need to leave now.
Oh, shit.
And then like 1,000 structures burned and a whole bunch of people got homeless. And we were, evacuated for like 3 weeks, came back, didn't have water for a month. And that's what's super weird. If you're living in a mountainous area, no matter where you are, chances are the water pipes that feed your house, the main lines, are all plastic because they need to be able to flex because mountains. And if they ever burn, it leaches benzene into the water supply, and it leaches benzene into the water table and the ground. And so the cleanup process for that is extensive, and you end up having to have all of your water trucked in. That's not tenable. That's not a way that you can long-term sustain a large group of people. With it, let's say tomorrow morning you get a phone call. And they're like, Tessa, we done fucked up. This great reset shit is not working out the way that we wanted to. We've decided, based solely on your writing, that we would like to put you in charge of the rest of the world.
Sounds very realistic.
What's the first thing what's your first suggestion?
Oh, wow. Oh, I mean, like, put me on the spot like that. Like,
definitely that's a loaded question.
Pressure.
I'm a bastard, by the way. I don't know if I've made that clear or not. I know that, like, sometimes it seems like I'm a nice person. I'm not. I'm a bastard. I am. So, very difficult question. You're in charge of the world. What's your first suggestion?
Well,
not that there's necessarily even going to be repercussions if you're wrong. Because let's be honest, the people in charge hardly ever face a single repercussion. So, relatively scot-free here, regardless of suggestion.
So first, I think I would do whatever possible without creating havoc to make good to the traditional indigenous people, because I think we are being impacted by that injustice, and that's kind of karma that we're dealing with. And I think that would be good in every way. First, it would be good because it's fair, and second, it would be good because it's practical, because bad karma is not really helping anybody.
No.
And of course, it is much easier said than done, because the world is complex. But I would probably try to create some kind of, again, like, structure to make sure that it's happening well. Since it's a world I'm in charge of, right? So that would have to happen everywhere. And in the United States, that the treaties are actually kept, at the very least, because so far they are legally, they have legal power, they are not kept. And I think from there, I would also delegate a lot of power, and I want to emphasize traditional people, because doing it by just, social, that's been hijacked by the alphabets. It's not right.
Yeah.
So from there, I would probably pray a lot and pray for guidance, because, ruling the world is not easy task, right?
Yeah.
No. So And hopefully some solutions will come in the process, because I think that imposing even the best ideas imperial style, that just doesn't work out. And so I would just start with that and just see how it goes, and would try to put power as much as possible into the hands of the people who have wisdom and kindness, and who are least likely to try to recreate the destruction with their own talking points.
So I had the privilege, and then I'll shut up for a minute while I'm trying to find the clip. Had the privilege of talking to John McAfee from the pirate yacht while he was on the run, but shortly before his arrest and eventual not dying in a Spanish jail. And he spoke on like the dynamics of power and what that means. And I wanted to play a clip of that for you just to get a reaction from you. But in the meantime, it did sound like I was cutting somebody off. So if anybody has anything to jump in with.
I was just saying that's a great answer. Because my first, like, it's a bit of a bitch ass question, but
very much.
It is a difficult question, Lori Jones.
Very much so.
Yeah, but I mean, my first answer would be to free all political prisoners, so and all freedom fighters.
I don't even know what mine would be.
Well,
mandatory DMT.
Okay, you see, mandatory.
That would be interesting.
Mandatory
Too
DMT.
forceful for me.
Yeah, isn't that a little authoritarian of you?
Yeah, that's. How do you know that people aren't going to have an adverse reaction to that?
Because they might.
Well,
what do you do then?
I guess we're just gonna. I mean, it is an experiment, right? It's always an experiment.
Oh, so now we're talking about test subjects.
But I do think some mandatory DMT would be helpful.
No, I think mandatory nothing. I mean, like, in fact, there's a film that is really little known.
It's a joke, by the way.
It's not. I mean, like, I know it's a Bangladeshi film called Television. I think it was made 2012, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I highly recommend it. But it revolves around the concept of force saving the community from bad technology and how it all plays out. So I highly recommend it. It's a 2012 Bangladeshi film, well, with subtitles, and it's called Television.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Now I actually don't want to play that clip because I'm wearing this fucking sweatshirt in it. I'm silly. But I'm gonna bring up the clip.
It's from 2012, right, Tessa?
Yeah.
The movie. Got you. It's opening a tab. I'm a pirate that.
Yeah, do it. Oops.
Okay, so here's John McAfee.
We have a society that gives a pretense of.
I can barely hear it, by the way. I'm
gonna try to fix that. Let me make sure I've got the audio on when I do that, because there is a audio button that I might have skipped. Let's try this again.
Relative.
There we go.
And a structured means of communicating and interacting with one another. It's called culture. But culture is the thinnest of all veneers. Let's look at what's under culture. The human creature. Yes, we love, we have compassion. We hope, we dream, we're caring, we're helpful. There is not a single human, I truly believe this, on the planet that if you were walking on a path by the river and a child was drowning 10 feet from you, you would not jump in and save the child, provided you could swim. If you couldn't, you'd be screaming for help. I truly believe that. However, that same creature is full of anger, greed, jealousy, fear, everything negative. And the reason that when our leaders become powerful, that they also universally become corrupt is because those beautiful aspects of the human animal, hopes, dreams, love, they don't need power, do they? What power does love need to activate? Nothing. You reach out to another human being and your heart fucking opens. No, so the good parts don't need power. And without power, we're pretty much in balance. What does?
That's where I want to stop that, because the last sentence right there is one of the most, to me at least, profound, is that without power we're pretty much in balance. And that's the one thing that he sort of just glosses right over as he continues to discourse. But I wanted to get your thoughts in the immediate on what John had to say there about the human creature, because I'm not sure if I agree with all that.
Well, very conveniently, I could barely hear what he was saying.
Okay.
So, I only.
You said that in the same being, in the same body, that there is boundless love. There is also essentially boundless fear, boundless greed, boundless anger, and boundless jealousy. And that it is only when we are encountered with and given power that we give ourselves over to the more negative aspects of the human creature.
Well, I mean, it would help to know what he actually meant on the inside when he said it, because it can be interpreted in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think
with
that
McAfee, you're never gonna know, and that's like
Well-
the because I don't know if you know a lot about this guy or not.
I mean, I know some.
But yeah, I mean, the whole like persona of John McAfee, the whole like caricature of the man is, I'm sure, several volumes worth of psychological textbooks. But or at least research papers. So I'm always fascinated to hear people's takes on that.
But I think that it is true that there's always, like, for the lack of better terminology, a positive and a negative, and they are in balance, and they are in this internal dance, balancing each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ultimately this universe is driven by love. And but again, you know, when you say it this way, it's like it's possible to have no idea what you're talking about and still use those words. So it's, you know, it really, the most important thing is what you feel on the inside when you say those words. And I think that human beings, I mean, like, corruption is a relatively natural state of a human being, and I think it's sort of spiritually this universe, or at least this life on earth, this human experience, is organized in such a way that we are ultimately stimulated to be our best selves. And if we try to avoid it, then we are stimulated more and more with increasing painfulness of experience. So I think that, like, lots of problems are relatively easy resolvable in early stages. Even with health, you know, like, you get something, you attend to it right away in the correct way, and you're good, and no big deal. But if you procrastinate for 10 years, then, and it works the same way, I think, for larger entities like nations or communities, or, you know, like bodies of people, where, and it is, I think every human being is inclined to avoid dealing with something that is not urgent. And who knows, maybe it takes lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes to arrive at a point where you, like, you see a problem, like, yeah, I'm going to deal with it right now.
Yeah, right now.
But it's kind of like some memory from a long time ago, perhaps, because I think, like, I myself have done so many stupid things. And it is kind of like, I mean, like, I have no even authority to judge anybody for anything, because, like, I fucked up, right? And it's like everybody does that. And So, but by virtue of seeing the results of not dealing with something, like at some point something kicks in, is like, okay, maybe it's a good idea to deal with it. But every human being arrives at it on, on our own terms. And some people maybe arrive at it on their deathbed, or maybe some people arrive at it like 10 times, like 10 lifetimes later. I mean, like, you never know. So it is true that there are two competing, like positive and the negative, and the love and the fear, and it kind of works in this mysterious dance that I think it's not possible to find the right words to describe. It's like beyond language.
I like that a lot. I think that's true. And just in the world, like the yin and the yang, almost just like these two forces that one is not without the other. There's always just this eternal dance, like you said.
I'm gonna go full nerd here. So when you said that, oh my god, okay, you know what? It was in my mind, so I'm just gonna go full send with this. The greatest TV show of all time is Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it's inspired by a lot of Far Eastern religions and spirituality. And in the first season of it, there's this scene between the main character, the Avatar Aang, and this spirit called Ko the Face Stealer. And one of the things that Aang has to do is he has to try and find the moon and the ocean spirit as they are in the real world, and he can't find it. So he seeks help from Ko, and the monologue he gives him is like along the lines of what you two just said, where he's like, Tui and La, the moon and ocean, they always circle each other in an eternal dance. They balance each other, push and pull, life and death, good and evil, yin and yang. And it's at that moment that Aang has his epiphany. So that's what I
like that a lot. No, that's cool. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because I always thought it was beautiful how like, these things balance each other out. And I think that's one of the things that's really beautiful in all of this, is how eventually these dueling forces will like dance together to somehow balance each other out.
Yeah, and I think there are powers bigger than even the people that are, in charge of executing the Great Reset. There are, as much as they try to fight it, in my personal opinion, a lot of the time they take out the human elements of all of this. And I know as much as they want to make us not, humans, they're taking that out of, they're not considering that as much. It goes back to the aspect of control again. But I always think that those bigger forces of, like you said, Gloria, like good, evil, yin and yang will always remain. I think the more that people just, you come to peace with it almost. It's for me at least, it almost brings a sense of comfort, like things will work themselves out. But that's not to say we shouldn't focus on these things either.
Absolutely. Now I have two things to say, because this is, I thank you for saying all those things. It's so interesting. And one, something that I watch out for in myself, because I've observed it like happen. Sometimes, like if you become an activist, horrible word actually, but anyway, so like you become this thing that is called an activist. And then there's a temptation to become rigid. And then if you look at it throughout history, it's often, people start out with this like sincere, noble idea, like I'm going to fix the world. And then, but in order to fix the world, I'm going to march everybody around. And the next thing you know is the new boss is worse than the old boss.
Yep.
And so that just happens so many times. And I think it's critically important for anybody who, has any kind of ambition to lead anybody anywhere, is to like watch out for that in yourself. And nobody's immune. Like I'm not immune. Like nobody's immune. It's just like it's a human thing. And then the other thing that I wanted to say, there's this absolutely the most fucked up cartoon of all times. That's an old Soviet cartoon. They had a category that was called cartoons for adults. And I only saw this thing once. I don't know the name of this cartoon, luckily. But so here's how it went. So there's a guy, and it's somehow set in Germany. So there's this guy sleeping in a sleeping cap on his bed, like on his bed. Like, like the German 19th century, like that outfit. And then there's this tiny little mosquito, like buzzing, like really loud. And So, and this guy is, he can't sleep. He's running around his apartment. He's trying to like fix this thing. And then finally, after many hours, he catches this mosquito. And there's this scene where he is like holding this mosquito by the wings and he's about to kill him. And then the mosquito does this thought bubble with all of his mosquito kids. And like, oh, please, like, don't kill me. And then, but it's not the fucked up part. The fucked up part comes like, it's really fucked up. So, and then the guy is like, he feels compassionate, right? He's like, okay. So he allows the mosquito to suck his blood. So he doesn't kill him. The mosquito sucks his blood and sucks his blood and sucks his blood and sucks his blood. And then eventually there remains only an empty shell of the man. And so the mosquito is now the size of the man. He tosses the guy out, that empty shell of the man. He puts his nightcap on and goes into his bed. The end.
Oh, that is fucked up. It's like
I was telling you.
Yeah, you did say it's like you become what you hate or what you're fighting against or whatever it is in a sense. But worse, I would say a lot of the time.
Yeah, whoever made this cartoon. I mean,
yeah. It is creepy. You wouldn't think of it normally with cartoons, and then the way you explained it, that's quite dark. Quite dark.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time you have, how long you can stick around. We've been going about an hour and a half. We should probably wind it down here shortly. But I wanted to get your thoughts on. You had talked about at the beginning of the show here about sort of the mindset of your grandparents' generation and your parents' generation and how that impacted you and how it impacted your Russian culture in general. Is there a conversation? Has there been a conversation in Russia at any point about inherited generational trauma and how that's impacted like the Russian psyche?
Well, not in those terms. I mean, that term has become trendy relatively recently, like in the mainstream. And I left the country before that. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure.
The concept is, I've seen it get like brought back up in conversations around like critical race theory, but as a scientific or psychological concept, it's been around for a while. But I mean, is that even just looking at it analytically, is that a factor, do you think, or is the concept of generational trauma so much like the philosophical hooey to you?
No, I think this is a very valid concept. Like, to me personally, I just don't know to which degree it is being discussed there, especially in the mainstream. That I cannot speak to because I don't know. Mm-hmm. Then as far as generational trauma, I think it is absolutely there. And unfortunately, I think there's not one human being on this planet who is not carrying it, because there has been so much mess created. And
I've often thought, and I've had a couple of conversations with an old bandmate about it, who basically put the idea in my head, but it goes along with what you just said there. But as individuals, we're almost forced into multiple personality disorder as children, because as a child, you're told like who you're allowed to be based on where your parents take you. Mm-hmm. And if you're with your parents as a kid, you're allowed to be a kid, 100% a kid at a park or, on a hike or something like that. You are not allowed to be a kid if you're in a store. You're definitely not allowed to be a kid if you're along with your parents at a place of worship. In fact, you're supposed to be an entirely different person there. You're supposed to be an entirely different person when you're at your school. And so all of these different people that you must be, unless you, upon risk of punishment, it has to have an impact on who we are and how we operate.
Oh, absolutely. And that's just, I think that's the easiest level to deal with. I mean, there's a lot more to that. But actually, I have a story. A few days ago, I was on a subway train, and I was going to write about it, but now I'm just giving you the story. And there was this woman with a kid, like a girl, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. The kid was just ridiculously cute. I mean, this girl, like, amazing. And she had this loud voice of a free person or a singer, like completely just like loud, and like very like artistic, and like she wanted, like, you know, to impress. Oh, well, I mean, she thought she saw that I was observing, and I started talking to her mom, and then she tried to impress me. But then her mom, being tired, like, you know, after work, and she was like, don't talk so loud, don't talk so loud, don't talk so loud. And I see this kid, and she's a singer. I mean, like, you can just see that she's a singer, like, at least to me. And I started telling her mom, like, maybe you have a really talented kid, like, you know, show her music, and like she's loud, so great, you have a talented child. And then the mom, of course, she's a good person, but she's tired, and she's like, I know, but she talks so loud, and she kept telling the kid, like, hush, 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 don't talk, don't be so, like, outwardly. And luckily the girl didn't seem to react too much. She just kept. But if it's repeated again and again and again and again and again, and I was thinking, I was that loud kid, and I was hushed for a while because, you know, that was a problem with the whatever society surroundings. And it took me, again, many years of pain and trying to sort it out and trying to find myself again. And that's probably a story of many people.
Oh, yeah.
And taking it back to today, well, first of all, telling the kids to not be loud, Steve, to speaking to what you were saying, that's kind of a common story. Like if you're on the plane or whatever. So, and our vocal expression is our soul. It's our, like, there's some great spiritual significance to our vocal expression. And so when kids are told that if they're speaking in their natural, loud, open, free voice, then they are somehow sinners, that they are breaking some rule, that has to have an impact on the soul. Mm-hmm. And it does. And then if you take it to today with all the, like, masking and all that, like, that's that trauma times 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've ruined a generation of children just in the last year. And all of the kids that were born whose parents bought into this shit, who were wearing masks in their own fucking houses around their kid, not allowing their child to understand facial cues, nonverbal cues, like the most important fundamental things to their development from 0 to like 3 months or 0 to 12 months, you know, it's so tremendously vital to not raising a broken child. And we didn't do it. In fact, people gleefully did the opposite and would shame other people for not psychologically destroying a generation of children. That is just upside fucking down, man. I don't.
Well, that is your collective and generational trauma in action, because I am sure that the majority, if not all parents who did that to their kids, did it with love, and they did it thinking that they were protecting their children. And it boils down that when parenthood is driven by fear, that creates trauma. But they don't know any other way. That's how they've been trained. And it's like, at some point, there has to be forgiveness. And actually, I wrote a piece about that specifically, like a letter to the children 20 years from now. But I think those children, if they're lucky, they will work through that, and they will forgive their parents. And they will realize that that was done from confusion, yes, but also from love, misguided, but without any evil intent.
No, I would agree. I would say most did it because they thought that was the best way to protect. And when you're fearful, you're more confused, you're easily susceptible to doing things that maybe you wouldn't if you were in a clear state. So I agree with that. I think that they will have some sense of forgiveness too. But yeah, we've really not even started to see the effects of this on children yet. Years down the line we will, but
I'm totally going to give away the premise of my book again, but because of how algorithmically censored this show is, I feel like I'm, still gonna have a chance. when I do write it. But yeah, I mean, that's what my theory, Tessa, is that consent was manufactured. Well, the book Manufacturing Consent is 30 years old, a little bit over 30 years old. And consent, at least the media's role in manufacturing it, that was handled, if not before the Patriot Act, then as the ink was drying on it after the signatures. And the primary role of the media since the passage of the Patriot Act has been to manufacture confusion. And that's why you see so many like counter reinforcing narratives coming at everyone from multiple angles 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because, as Ali was saying, if you're confused, you are in a very malleable state, and you can be led to or driven to all kinds of things based solely on preying on that confusion and on the fear that that confusion generates.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's straight out of the torture manual, creating controversial like situations where one cannot make like it's impossible to understand. It's not steadily horrible. It's just extremely confusing.
It's a constant state of like sensory deprivation or overload, depending on which avenue of media you're going for.
Yep. And it's just the parallels again of like just an abusive relationship, whether that's, you know, like a romantic relationship or your parents, whatever it is. There's lots of parallels with how people will acquiesce or not think clearly when they're confused, you know, they're gaslit by another person, another group.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Tessa, I want to thank you very, very much for being on with us today. It's been wonderful, and please do come back. Let the audience know where they can find your work, how they can support your work, and yeah, just thanks again. This has been great.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. So. The easiest way, well, my pandemic-related writing and everything that has to do with the Great Reset and such, it's on Substack. It's Tessa, Tessa.substack.com. And from there, you can actually find all other links. On Twitter, I'm Tessa Fights Robots. And my music project is Tessa Makes Love. And I guess if you Google my name, which is luckily right there, can also, well, duck, go my name. So.
Yeah, duck, go. There you go.
Not that they're much better, but you know.
Yeah, a little better, right? We take what we can get.
And thank you so much for having me. That was
thank you.
Yes, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you.
And you're free to take off whenever. Just close out of the browser. We're gonna read through a couple of the super rays that came in over on the Rockfin. And then we'll get the fuck up out of here. At least until tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
And I think Jones and I will be back later for Anonymous Bites Back. But Gardy Lou, Will M.
We're doing an ABV tonight?
MacArthur, I think so.
All right.
But yeah, Gardy Lou, Will M., Peter MacArthur, thank you very, very much. Gaina Fauci. I'm inspired to hitchhike the land to find Tessa for more of this. So please have her back on. I need to learn how to fight robots. Tea Leaves says right on Glory and wanted to know Tessa's thoughts on ringing cedars Anastasia analogy, but I have no idea what the fuck that means, and she's already gone. So I'm sorry. Tea Leaves. Next time. She did say she was going to come back, so we got that going for us. Thank you to everyone who threw a super ray at us. We appreciate the fuck out of you for that.
Always appreciate it on Slow News Day.
Yeah.
All right. We do have a GoFundMe up for the show. I will bring this up on the screen rather briefly, and then grab the links and throw them into the chatty chat one last time. It is how we're getting the show rolling and keeping it going. So if you can, look, we're all wearing matching t-shirts. Look how happy Sleepy Josh is. Don't you want to, doesn't that just make you want to fully fund the show? I mean, we're so, like, we're actually ridiculously close to halfway there.
Yeah.
We're less than $600 away from that. It would make me panic less to see that go up. I mean, it's straight up like what we're doing for, it's what I'm doing for a living, and I'm trying to pay at least Sleepy Josh at this point. So if you can, please do donate to that. If you can't, I get it, dude. I fully fucking get it, and I could not donate to anybody's GoFundMe right now, so I ain't even mad at you. But like, please share the link because that really does help too. Allie, what do you got?
It's good to be back, by the way. Yes, good to be here. Just been working on, well, just work lately, but I have been able to get a couple articles out, so you can find those at alliealexandra.substack.com. Yeah, that's all I've got right now, really. I turn 32 tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
I do.
Oh yeah,
I do. Ah! So 32. Woo! It's kind of like, but you know, my 30s have been good.
All right. Well, you can find my writing when I do it on Hive. It's Zero Eclipse with 2 E's at the end. And trying to think of what else. The big thing, of course, July 20th is when Commander X's first hearing in court is scheduled. That is scheduled to happen at 9 a.m. Pacific time, so that would be 12 p.m. East Coast time. And because of that, we will be having a day of action for Commander X. There will be, the action that me and Steve will be at will be in San Jose in the Peckham Federal Building. It's the San Jose courthouse, the district court there. And that is going to take place at noon. It will be us two along with Keith McHenry there, who I can't wait to protest with, and me. It'll be awesome. And there's also going to be an action in front of the U.S. Embassy in La Ciudad de Mexico, which is Mexico City. And you can count on our good friend Natalia for that. So I'm pretty sure that's happening at 10 a.m. their time, or either 10 a.m. or noon, but all the details are on at FreeCommanderX_ on Twitter. That's where all the protest flyers are. And you can also find the information at freecommanderx.org.
So I am going to go ahead real quick before we close out and split. I'm going to drop a link and the webinar ID and the password to the way for you to watch the video stream of X's court appearance. It is vital that we get as many eyes as humanly possible on this hearing, to send a very strong message to the people who have kidnapped and incarcerated X that they don't get to do this shit without consequences and without attention. So if you can't make it to a protest, if there's not a protest going on or a solidarity action going on where you are, please log on, let these people know that that in fact the world is watching what they're doing to our friend and our brother, and we're not gonna fucking stand for it. Think that's about it. Please join us tomorrow, regular time, 1 p.m. on the East Coast, 10 a.m. on the West Coast for the Big Ass Sunday show. We're going to have two guests. We're going to have Gordon from those conspiracy guys. I apparently only meet people from the UK and her affiliated territories named Gordon now. I guess that's how that's gonna work. But those conspiracy guys, very, very, very funny show out of Ireland, and looking forward to that. Sabby Sabs will also be on the show with us tomorrow, the 11 o'clock part of the hour. Looking forward to that, man. It's gonna be a good day. There's a Union of the Unwanted coming up next week. I don't know if that's full panel or if it's just the hosts. Don't really know that until day of. But man, that show's fucking fun. It's great when it's a full panel. That shit's awesome.
Yeah.
Supposed to be talking to Jeffrey Wilson and Pat Militek from the Conspiracy Farm. Garland Nixon will be on with us next week. Reed Coverdale next Sunday. I'm gonna be on Tinfoil Hat next week, and I'm gonna be on Chrissy Mars' show. One of them at any rate. She got like 3 podcasts too. You can't just be a comedian. You can't just make money telling jokes. You gotta have 85 podcasts. You gotta fucking. It's ridiculous. Man. Ridiculous.
You gotta have the collab shows with the other comedians. Yeah, totally.
100%. I do wish I could go to fucking Skankfest this year. That shit sounds fun as fuck. Did you see the lineup?
I did.
That's fucking crazy, dude. I would love to get down to Houston for that. Don't think it's going to happen. I'm sure the tickets are going to sell out, so I'm not even worried about it. Yeah. But if anyone has a direct link to any of the hosts of Legion of Skanks, let them know that we would like to talk to them.
Yeah.
Fuck, I love you guys. We'll see you soon. Big thanks to everyone who hung out and watched. Thanks again to Tessalina. Tessa fights robots. Tessa makes love. Big thanks to my better than your co-hosts, Ali Alexander and Glory Jones. Sleepy Josh was not with us on the 1s and 2s for this particular show. He'll be back tomorrow. He's taking a well-deserved day off with his honey.
With his lady.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. Hey, Mona.
So we'll see you guys soon. Good luck to us all.
Bye.
Says the